Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live stream. As usual, if you can see what's going on, if you could just let me know you can hear everything actually, that's the important thing. As long as the sound's working we should be okay. If the sound is quiet, I think we fixed the sound problems now, just make sure your YouTube volume at the bottom is turned up to the max. I'll just give it another 10 seconds, then we'll start on the dot of 2:30. So we do these every Friday at 2:30. If you've never attended them before, right, it's 2:30 now. Let's get into it. So the way it works, for those of you who haven't seen these before, I go through very quickly the economic calendar for next week, talk about what's been moving this week. We will spend most of the session, we run for an hour, on our trading platform, on the Capital.com trading platform. So we'll look at all these different markets on here. If there's any markets you want looking at, if you could put it in the chat. We do look at a bit of everything, but anything you want looking at, put it in the chat. Don't spam the chat with the market. I do get around to them all eventually. And that's it. Let's get into it. So this presentation is for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones and Capital.com accept no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. Spread bets and CFDs are complex instruments and come with a high risk of losing money rapidly due to leverage. 76.25% of retail investor accounts lose money when spread betting and or trading CFDs with this provider. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets and CFDs work and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Okay, that's the risk warning done. We've got a bit of a global audience today. Samui, I don't even know where that is. And Amsterdam. Right, let's get into it. So important events for next week. There's one major event next week, but Tuesday, 1st of June, Australian interest rate decision. And next Friday is the big one. So we'll be doing our live stream an hour after the non-farm payrolls have come out. So they come out the first Friday of every month. So they're out next Friday, 1:30. US unemployment data, the big shock last time round. It'll be interesting to see what they look like this time round. But this time next week, we'll find out then. And that's it really for next week in terms of major announcements. Stock markets, edged higher this week. I think stock markets, we'll take a look at those. US, Europe, and Japan. We'll have a look at those. Gold and silver, 4-month high in gold. I think we'll start things off with gold this time around. Silver, a bit sideways silver. We did a silver video yesterday. If you're watching this on YouTube, we do always push out 3 videos throughout the week on YouTube. If you subscribe to the channel, you get an alert when that happens, as well as these live streams. But I looked at silver yesterday. It's still bullish silver, but I wonder if it's going to start struggling. We'll take a look in a sec. Bitcoin and Ethereum, of course, that was the story last week, wasn't it? The crash in Bitcoin, and in all the cryptos really, but it's still volatile, but I wonder if they're stabilizing and if there's an opportunity. We'll take a look at it. Crude oil, 2-month high in crude oil. Last week, it was a 1-month low, and I think I was bullish on it last week. It's turned around, 2-month high. Interesting market. Take a look at that. Foreign exchange, euro dollar, 4-month high in the euro over the last week. Take a look at those. And I'll also take a look at some of the markets I've been trading, which we don't cover as major markets, but coffee, been a great one the last few weeks. So we'll take a look at that as well. I'll talk a bit about that. We'll do the details before we get into the charts. To find out more about the platform and trading with us, then that is Capital.com. Find out more about me, davidjonestrading.com. That takes you to a Facebook page. I've finally written this online trading course, so that's you can find out more details on that from davidjonestrading.com. Any questions after the session, drop me an email. We can't obviously give financial advice, but any general trading questions, david.jones@capital.com. And at Jones the Markets on Twitter, and of course follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Right, let's get into it. Gold, let's start with gold. We'll look at the major markets, then I'll do any requests that come in. So it's really interesting, gold. I think we do have a gold trade in this account anyway. Again, just to explain, this account is a real account. It started off with £10,000 in the summer of 2019. It's Capital.com's money, but it is a real account. And so I use this account when we do the videos and the live streams. Obviously, I've got my own trading account as well. But we've got a couple of trades on gold running from the 29th of April. That's up 480 quid. 19th of May, that was filled on a breakout through 1880. So that's in. So I still think it's going to be a really interesting few months for gold. That's what I think. We've got this trend. We've got the all-time highs last year in gold, $2,075 in the summer last year. Then it was correcting. And we had in the live stream a few weeks ago, so we've got these converging trend lines. Where's the break going to come? We've got a bit of a recovery going on from the March lows, and it's broken out. So it would normally suggest that we're going to see more strength from here. It is, for those of you who are fans of RSIs, it is looking very overbought on the RSI. Personally, I would focus more on the price action. But for me, I'd be looking to be a buyer of dips on gold. So for me, the obvious intermediate target is these old highs, November and Jan highs. Let's say the highs for the year so far. Highs for the year so far are in just ahead of 1960, 1,960. So that's my next target for gold. Obviously, we're not going to get there in a straight line, so we'll see what happens. But for me, any weakness, back towards 1840, this sort of area, still looks like a buying opportunity. So, it's been a quiet couple of days. Let's just zoom it in. But it did push up on Wednesday, its best levels since right at the beginning of January. So a 4-month high on Wednesday. So it'll be an interesting one to watch that. I mean, we're seeing some dollar weakness, and clearly that helps, but also maybe concerns about inflation. That's been whirling around markets a bit for the last couple of months, so maybe that's helping the price of gold. But looks positive, the old trend chugging away there on gold. Let's take a look at silver. Bit not quite as exciting, silver. But this was the video we did yesterday, so it's on our channel. And what I was looking at was this trend really. We do have a few trades running in silver. Hold on a sec. Where are they? Down here. 16th of Feb, 13th of May, and the 1st of March. They're all in profit, but not by much. But that trend is still up for me. So for me, I'd still be a buyer on silver. When it comes to placing stop losses, the tightest I'd have it is at $27. The trend is still up. I do wonder though with silver, and I covered this at some length in yesterday's video. Look at what a problem 28 to 30 has been on silver. So just up here, I just start to get a bit wary about how much upside is there really left. I know there's always talk about a short squeeze and everything else on silver. But I've got my own trade on silver as well in my own account. So it'd be nice if it went higher from here. But we've seen back to August last year, it just can't hold for long above $28. But for now the trend is up. So if I didn't have a trade on, I'd still be a buyer in that trend. So let's see. But interesting one. Not as good a week as gold, but okay overall. Let's take a look at crude oil. Let's have a look at that one. I think I put an order in crude and it hasn't been filled. But the trend is still up. It's just, I know we were getting a load of stick. I do read all the comments on the YouTube videos. Getting a load of stick a few months ago. Someone was saying, why are you always buying crude oil? Why do you never sell short? Well, because the trend is up. That's why I want to be a buyer. And this week, we've pushed back, not quite to the highs for the year from March, but not a million miles away. So on the video this week, a few days ago, I put an order in to buy at 63.50. It hasn't been filled yet. Perhaps it'll come under some pressure next week, crude oil. I mean, there was a concern if the US slackens sanctions against Iran, that the Iranian oil will hit the market, and we'll have perhaps more supply. That was a concern. I think that was maybe part of the reason we saw it under pressure the other week. But we've seen it bounce back strongly. For me, I wouldn't buy it now if I didn't have a trade on. But I think it is interesting if it gets knocked back from these levels. You know, it's been, if we looked at it like that, it's been pretty sideways throughout May. That's where my order is. I think if it got knocked back next week, it looks like an interesting trade. You know, we've got good support at 61.5, 62. Let's see what happens over the next week. So I'd be expecting it perhaps to start struggling over the next week. On the other hand, if we get a breakout through 68, I think what would be the next target? I suppose I'd have to pick 70 as the next target for crude. Or we could go really aggressive and pick up on October 2018 highs. Because if it breaks 68 next week, it's at its highest levels in about 2.5 years. So let's see what happens on crude next week. But it wouldn't surprise me if it got perhaps a little bit nervous up here. Let's see what happens. But overall, that trend is still up. So I would definitely still be a buyer of dips in crude oil. Let's take a look at stock markets. Trend is still up. Stock market, so the trend, it's been a bit quiet, perhaps a bit choppy this month, but this is the S&P 500. We have an uptrend in place off the March lows, so we are 14 months into that now. It did move to fresh highs for the move and fresh all-time highs this month. So fresh all-time highs. I'm a buyer of dips if something's hitting fresh all-time highs. It'll be an interesting one next week to see what happens. It's been a bit of a boring week this week on the S&P. But, you know, do we go back to 42, 45, the all-time highs? That would be my target in the short to medium term. If it got knocked back below 4,100, for me, it's a great buying opportunity. I think it's only if we start moving below those mid-May lows at 4,035 would I worry about perhaps a deeper sell-off. So a little bit quiet, but overall, the bias is still up. Nasdaq. So Nasdaq, again, look at this really quiet week. Look at these daily candles. Look how tight the range has been the last 4 days. I mean, clearly we've only just started trading officially. But the last 3 days have been really quiet in the Nasdaq. So anyway, there's the Nasdaq from March of last year. Fell out of the trend line. But for me, that doesn't necessarily mean the trend's going to end. Maybe it just goes up at a slower rate. So for me, I'd still happily be a buyer of dips. And if we got knocked back next week towards 13.2, quite happily be a buyer down there. I think we need to see what happens next in the Nasdaq. Are we going to break out to fresh all-time highs? I think there is clearly a lot of nervousness about the tech sector in recent months. Has it got overvalued? All that sort of stuff. Who knows? But for me, it's arguably not technically as strong a trend at the moment as the S&P 500. But I'd still be a buyer on dips when it comes to the Nasdaq. Ftse, let's bring it back to the UK, Ftse 100. I do have some trades running on the Ftse, and they're doing okay. It's a bit, again, it's been fairly boring. You know, look where we're trading now in the Ftse, 7,040, pretty much where we were about a week ago. Yeah, so a week ago it closed at 7,020. So we've had a bit of flipping around this week, no real progress. But the trend is still up. I've picked the trend up off the Feb lows for this year, Jan-Feb lows for this year. You know, it's a little bit boring, the Ftse, but that trend is still up. You know, you can see what a good job 6,800 did as support in the middle of May. So any weakness from here down to there, I'll still be a buyer of the Ftse. So a bit uninspiring, but okay overall. DAX, German market. Oh, it looks like, it looks like it's having a go at those highs again. So, I mean, those are all-time highs on the DAX, aren't they? Just the other week, or just this week. Hang on. Yeah, Monday. So Monday, Tuesday, it hit all-time highs, got knocked back a bit, and it looks like it might be going up again. So again, the trend is up. You know, the DAX trend is up. If we looked at the shorter-term chart, we've seen good support down at 15,350 this week. It's a pretty volatile market, the DAX. But for me, I'd be looking to see, can it run back up to the old highs at 15.6? So all still positive. Even the Nikkei, which I do have a trade on from, I think, December on the Nikkei, and it hasn't been going nowhere, but it has found a bit of momentum this week, the Nikkei. So traded down to 27,000 in May. I think I don't know where I bought actually. It was probably not far away from 27,000, maybe 26.5. And is it trying to stage some sort of recovery? For me, if I didn't have a trade on, I'd probably want to see if it can break 29.7, the highs from May the 10th, and this isn't just another move up and it flops back down again. But a little bit of strength over the last couple of weeks in the Nikkei. It has lagged behind US indices in recent months. Let's see what happens. Maybe it'll look a bit more interesting next week when it comes to this. I've just noticed an interesting question. When do you think the massive bear move will come to the S&P 500? I have seen there's been a lot of chat on Twitter the last couple of weeks about this massive correction that's coming. And the problem is when everyone talks about a massive correction, that's exactly when it doesn't come. So for me, I've got 3 open positions on the S&P. I've got stop losses on all of them. 2 of them are in profit. 1 of them's at break even. If we have a massive correction, we have a massive correction. But I would, I've seen a lot of chat about this, and I just ignore it. I think you learn to ignore this stuff because, there's a great saying, bull markets climb a wall of worry. And it's very true. When a market's going up, everybody's panicking about, well, when's it going to go down? Apart from Bitcoin, of course, where everyone just thinks it's going to the moon. And that's exactly when it does, slap them around the face. So for me, for me personally, I'm not too worried about a massive bear move in the S&P. And when it comes, I'll be out of my trades and look at it with a fresh pair of eyes. But fair question, because there has been a lot of talk about it. Right, so stock market indices still positive, I think. Massive bear move around the corner. But happy to stick with those trends for now. Let's look at the old cryptos. So I think I did a trade on Bitcoin. I think is it losing money? Oh, it's down a little bit. Did a trade on Bitcoin. The video we did last week, bought it at 38. The market's 36.8 at the moment. I think it's interesting, what's going on. We'll look at Bitcoin and Ethereum because I would say arguably, and I'm not, I always say I'm not really a fan of these markets because I think they just suck in a bunch of people who don't know what they're doing and hope they go up forever and get really burnt when they don't. But I think it's interesting, the move, like I said last week in Bitcoin, it went from 64,000 mid-April back to here. And we've come back to the trend line in Bitcoin. So, if you think the trend in Bitcoin is still up, and I still do, I'd be a buyer. I'd be a buyer here, and I'd put my stop probably the other side of 28,000. So it's interesting the volatility and the choppiness we've seen in Bitcoin over the last week now, I think since the big slide. But for me, I would be tempted to be a buyer. And also for fans of the RSIs, we have gone quite oversold down here. So I think it's an interesting market to watch. I think if 28,000 breaks, there'll be a whole load of new selling, I would expect. And I think we could see it pushed lower. But for now, I'd be quite happy to be a buyer on that one. Let's see what happens. I do think it'll be a while before we see 64,000 again. Ethereum, same sort of thing in Ethereum, really. It got knocked back from 4.4. May the 12th, traded as low as 1,700-ish on the 23rd. Had a little blip up, had a little blip down. So for me, again, I'd be thinking about being a buyer. Let's take a look on the hourlies. Arguably now, and put a stop loss. My stop loss would go the other side, at least the other side of the extreme. Maybe in a different place for those of you who've seen a bit of how I trade. But at the absolute closest, the other side of 1,700 on Ethereum. So let's see what happens. That's it. That's the cryptos. Let's do the more traditional currencies. My mind's gone blank. What are we going to look at? Pound against the dollar. Let's look at pound against the dollar. Pound against the dollar is interesting. Let's flip it over to a daily. Bit of a big move yesterday. I mean, that trend for me is still up. I'd probably be more focused on what's been going on since the April lows. I think it's going to be an interesting week next week because we had the highs from Feb at 142.40. The market has traded up to 142.33, came within 7 points of the high. So I think there's a couple of ways of playing this. If you thought that pound against the dollar was overvalued, you've almost got the perfect place to go short up here. The market is trading at 141.60. You could go short, and for me, if I was short now, I put a stop loss above that February high. So somewhere above 142.40. So it's quite interesting, I think, if you really wanted to go short up here. Me, I still think the trend is up, pound against the dollar, but would I want to buy it here? Perhaps not. I do have a trade on pound against the dollar anyway. Would I buy it here? If I was buying it here, I'd put my stop maybe 140.50. The better trade for me would be a bit of a push down towards 140. So interesting, up at these levels. And I think if it can break 142.40, then the obvious target is for a run back for me near 144. So the April 2018 highs. So interesting market up here, pound against dollar. But I think perhaps what's more interesting is euro, US dollar. Oh, that's interesting. It's got really clobbered. So we did see, I think I mentioned, I have missed this rally in the euro against the dollar. Because all the way through this bit, I was waiting for a bit of a turnaround and I was going to be a buyer. And it came back down to the previous lows, near the previous lows from September and November. And it turned around, but it just took off without really looking back. So I missed it a bit. So I'd still like to be a buyer for euro against the dollar. The only question is where. And I'll probably pick up on the trend since April. So it might be one, perhaps, for next week for me. Trend, there we go. So for me, that's an interesting opportunity, euro, US dollar. Actually, I could even be tempted to be a buyer now. Maybe we'll come back. Let's see in half an hour where it is in half an hour. If I was a buyer now, the closest I'd have my stop probably at 121, perhaps even further. But an interesting week again to see if it can push a bit higher next week, euro against the dollar. And the other market I'll touch on, I've mentioned this a few times in the past, my absolute best trade this year. I've got 3 trades running at the moment. I've done 4 trades on it this year and I've still got 3 open positions. And someone mentioned it in a live stream. That's where I started looking at it back in Feb. So even I get value out of doing these live streams. So sterling yen. So sterling Japanese yen. Clearly the pound has been strong, the yen has been weak, and it breaks out again yesterday. Massive move yesterday. Went from 154 the day before, traded as high as 156, so a 200-point move yesterday. If I wasn't in already, would I buy it now? I'd probably wait next week, see what happens next week. I think that a great setup here would be a bit of a pullback following this breakout, and then perhaps look at getting in. But great trend in sterling yen. Bit of resistance up here, but 3-year highs yesterday in sterling yen. So a bit of a mixed week for the currencies, but I think lots to watch going into next week. And I think I've done everything, haven't I? We looked at oil, we looked at Bitcoin, stocks, a couple of currencies, looked at gold. The other market, I did see someone mention it, so I'll look at it now. Coffee. Great trend in coffee. I think I mentioned the other week I traded this, and it's leaped up today. I've got no idea why, but I'm very happy about it. But coffee, we got a long-term trend going back to May 2019. It's really accelerated away from the trend. And I bought it ages ago, last year, and got bored with it, tightened my stop up, got out for a small, tiny profit. But then it got interesting again to me here in May, broke out in May. This is the sort of thing I'd be looking for in sterling yen. Breaks out, sells off, and I bought in there, and it did gap the next day, and it's just gone crazy since then. So I'm already in a break-even stop position in that. But coffee's interesting. I do wonder, we're up at the best levels since November 2016. So it's a 4-year plus high on coffee. We did have a pretty major peak back then at 164.30, 164.40. So it might be a bit wary up here, but clearly, a great run in this one. If we flip it over to an hourly chart, there's our trend for the last, nearly the last couple of months. So I don't know if I'd buy it now, but a nice trend. If we got a pull back to 150 next week, we're bang on that trend line. So I think it'd be an interesting one to watch going into next week. So I think there are lots of interesting ones to watch. Oil, we looked at oil, and it's, can it break out through 68 and break out to new highs? Pound against the dollar, can it break out to new highs of the recovery there? So I think there's plenty to watch going into next week. But let me jump into some of the questions and have a look at some of these markets that people want to have a look at. Hold on a sec. Bitcoin and Ethereum, we did that. Like I say, I think they're interesting as well. Those two, as things have calmed down a little bit. Can we have a look at sterling Aussie dollar? Yes, let's have a look at that. So the pound against the Australian dollar. Here we go. Let's have a look on the dailies. That's interesting. Look at this stat here, the market sentiment. 63% of people are sellers. So 63% of people with us who've got an open position are short the pound against the Aussie dollar. I wouldn't be short personally, but there you go. It's an interesting market. I mean, for me, I would say, the last 8 months or so, have we made a base in sterling against the Aussie? And it's moved up. It's still strong. And then going into next week, again, it's all sort of a bit wait and see at the moment, isn't it? We have these highs up here at 85.25, so about 150 points higher than where the market is now. Are we going to see a breakout? Or are we going to see it run out of steam? Again, if you really wanted to go short sterling against the Aussie dollar, a bit of weakness next week could be the sign that it's fading again ahead of here. If it breaks through there, perhaps we're seeing the start of a new trend. I think that will be an interesting one to come back to next week. But short to medium term, still strong. Let's see what happens up at these highs from October next year. But an interesting one to see. Can we have a look at the dollar index? Yeah, we didn't look at that. This is my biggest loser at the moment. Biggest losing position I've got. I nearly got stopped out this week, but I didn't. And I think it's interesting where it's turned around. We've got. I think I said. I've been looking at this. Let's just change this. Been looking at this trend since the highs in March last year, and I wondered at the beginning of the year, breaks out of the trend. Is this finally when we see, or do we see a big dollar comeback this year? And I was really right on it right up until the end of March, and then since the end of March, I have been completely wrong on it. But it's interesting that it's come right back down to the old lows. So for me, if I didn't have a trade on at the moment that was so underwater and nearly got stopped out, I think if you think the dollar's going to recover from here, the dollar index, it's a great risk reward. So I would be maybe that's the trade we do. Let's do that trade. Let's do the trade in this account. So the low from the 6th of Jan was 89.20. So for a stop, let's go 88.90 for a stop, and I'm going to buy it because I think we could see it recover again. So my stop is going to be 88.90. I normally risk 100 quid on these live stream trades. So there we go. So buy 110 contracts at 90.22. Stop at 88.90. You can see it there. Let's buy it. Done. Okay, let's see how that one turns out. But I think it is interesting down here because this was the low for the year in Jan, and it's come all the way back to it. It's dropped back about 400 points or so, and we've seen a bit of strength over the last few days. So it's an interesting market to watch. Hold on a second. So we looked at that. Take-Two interactive software. Let's have a look at those. Take-Two. What do they do? Take-Two develops, publishes, and markets interactive entertainment company. Okay, offers its products under the Rockstar Games label. Let's have a look. Nice trend over the years, isn't it? I mean, for me, it's a difficult one. I think. For me, the trend is up. So for me, if I look at something like this, I think I want to be a buyer. The only question is where do you buy? Or where do your stop go? Which is a big question. So the 5-year trend is up. The trade was, if we could get in our TARDISes and wind back time, the trade was back here at 165 because you had a logical place for a stop under 160 or under 150. So up here, what I would probably rather wait for it to see if it sells off and do we get a second bite of the cherry down here. But for me, that trend is definitely up. What's the signal for Tesla going to be next week? Tesla, I think we did do I mentioned we've launched this stocks channel, and we did look at Tesla the other week, and I've put the link to the stocks channel in the description of this video. So if you're watching the recording afterwards or watching it now, you should be able to see it in the description of the video, so you can subscribe to our stocks channel. But I thought Tesla was a buy. I think I bought it. Didn't we buy it? We bought it, and we did a video on this channel, didn't we, for Tesla? I bought Tesla somewhere. There is an open position, 18th of May. So it will be last week we did a video on Tesla. So I bought them at 580, and they're 627 now. So it's up 135 quid on that. And for me, it won't come as a surprise. I bought it because the trend is up. So we had a little fiddle below the trend line mid-May, and it's bounced so far. So for me, if I didn't have a trade now, where did the stop go on that trade? 490. Okay. So my stop was down here, the other side of 500. A more aggressive stop, maybe at 530. But for me, I'll be looking to see if it can recover from here in Tesla, because that trend is definitely up. US dollar, CNH. Is that what is that? CNH. Is that the Chinese market? I should know, shouldn't I? Yeah, Chinese yuan. Okay. So dollar. I remember we looked at this, didn't we, the other week, and I wondered if it was a buy, and it doesn't look like a buy at the moment. It's interesting. If I would have bought that, and I would have got stopped out, I would definitely have bought in here if I was watching it. But it's interesting that it's breaking down again. So the dollar losing ground. So for me, pretty weak. We've got loads of support coming in from 2018, about 625. But that looks pretty weak, doesn't it? I don't know if I'd sell it now or if I would wait for a rally, see if you get a rally to sell it. But the fact it's broken below this sort of 6.4 level is not good. It would have sucked me in there, and then bang, I would have been stopped out on that one. But it looks weak, I think. So yeah, further weakness perhaps still to come for that. Wheat, yeah, wheat's an interesting market. Do we cover wheat? For me, I think there's a trade in wheat. For me, clearly nothing today is financial advice, but I was watching. I've got it on my list of things that maybe there's a trade in, because we've got this great trend, and it's pulled back a load from the highs in April. So traded at 215, and it's come all the way back, and it has reversed the last couple of days. So I think that's another interesting market going into next week, because the trend for wheat has been up for a year and a half now, and we're back to the trend line. So I think that's a really interesting market to watch, and I think if you're a fan of RSIs, it's oversold on the RSI as well. So interesting one, wheat. So I'll be watching to see if there's a bounce. On the flip side, I think if we push much below 180, it does look like this trend is in trouble. This 18-month trend is in trouble. So an interesting market next week. Euro sterling. Let's have a look at euro sterling. I do have a trade on euro sterling. It's losing money at the moment, but I was going for the reversal. So a bit of a recovery in euro sterling. It's not happening yet, but I think for me, it breaks out the trend line, pushes a bit higher, chops around. It's really gone nowhere, has it? But for me, perhaps we will see it reverse. I think if it starts breaking below 85.60 again, the risk is we'll get a deeper sell-off back to those lows in April. So let's see what happens. It's a trade for me that hasn't worked out yet, but patience is an important quality when it comes to trading. So we'll see what happens. Platinum. I think platinum's an interesting market at the moment. I do have a trade on platinum as well. For ages, and for platinum, it's been pretty boring. It's currently trading where it was in February, so 3 months, lots of chop, nearly 4 months actually, but no real progress. But the trend is up. We go off the lows from March last year. The trend in platinum is up. We've got good support at 1,100 and at 1,000. So for me, I'm still long. I think I've got perhaps a small profit on the trade, perhaps a small loss, I don't even know. But it's just been a bit boring. But that trend is still up for platinum. And it's coming down to where we have seen support in recent weeks and months. But you look at that. You can see on the hourly chart just how sideways it's been. This is just the last 2 months or so, but really sideways. But lots of support shorter term from 1140 to 1160, but a little bit dull at the moment. Sugar, yeah, let's have a look at sugar. I think I've got a trade on sugar. I don't think, has it done much? Oh yeah, it's done all right, isn't it? Let's have a quick look. Sugar, oh, it's a bit of a move today, isn't it? So for me, the trend is up on sugar. It had a little bit of a wobble below the trend in April, but that doesn't concern me too much. And with just a little bit of a move back to the trend line over the last week, we've seen a bit of a bounce. So for me, still bullish on sugar, still happy to stay long, looking for a run back up to here, back up to 19, that sort of area. If it weakens next week, I'd still be happy to be a buyer. I think if it only loses this low in April, early April, would I think that actually maybe the trend is changing in sugar, but happy to stay long with that one. Sterling Canadian dollar. Let's have a look at that. GBP Canada. What does it look like? It looks a little bit boring, doesn't it? Look at that. That is the very definition of a sideways trend, isn't it? Sterling Canadian dollar. I mean, what would you do? What I would do, if it got knocked back next week, it'd look to be a buyer, because you can see it doesn't spend much time in the sort of below 170 really, does it? So if it got knocked back next week, be looking to be a buyer. But for me, that's not my sort of market, because it's too sideways. But and it is very sideways, going back 18 months now. But for me, yeah, it would be a trading buy below 170. We looked at crude oil. We did that. We did Ethereum, Ftse energy. I think we looked at those. We looked at those the other week. Let's have a look. Ftse energy. It still looks a little bit drifty to me, I think. That's what I would say. A little bit drifty. So, since the highs, what was the high? 228 was the high, 143 today. If you wanted to go short, it's almost the perfect area to go short. So for me, if I had to do a trade, I'd sell short, and the closest I'd have my stop would probably be above 150, but ideally above 175, because we've, this trend is still down, isn't it, from Feb? So we are 3 months and a bit into that. So for me, I'd probably be looking to sell short if I had to do anything at all with that one. Let's have a look. What else have we got? Ethereum, coffee. We did look at coffee. Doge. I thought we were going to get through a live stream without having to do Doge, but we have our Doge fan club on. It's the same as the other cryptos, really, isn't it? It's if you really wanted to buy it at 0.31111, if I was a buyer now, the closest I'd have my stop would be the other side of 20. Do that low. I think if these cryptos do break these lows from last week, we're going to see them lurch lower again. So there we go. There's your Doge. Peloton. Oh yes, look at those. Peloton. That is Peloton, isn't it? P-T-O-N. Peloton. Peloton Interactive, because they had to recall all their in the US, didn't they? Recalled a load of product in the US. Great run, obviously, during lockdown. From, where did it go? $20 to 170. I think the question with Peloton is whether you believe the trend is still up. I don't actually. I don't believe the trend is still up in Peloton. So, for me, I would be looking to go short Peloton, I reckon. I would treat this strength, actually, but is it breaking out? I'd treat this strength as a bounce. Actually, maybe that's another trade we'll do. You can go short Peloton. So I'd treat this as a selling opportunity. For RSI fans, it's very overbought down here as well. So for me, let's go short Peloton, and we'll put a stop at 130. Let's do that and see how that one works out. And then, if the S&P bear market turns up, at least we've got a bit of short exposure. Hang on a sec. How many do I need to sell? There you go. I'm going to sell 8 at 113, wherever it is they're trading now, with a stop at 130, a risk of 95. Go. Short. Right, there we go. With short Peloton. see, we'll come back to that in a week's time and see how well or not that's doing. So for me, if it broke above 127, I'd change my mind on the current trend. But I do think we have shifted from an uptrend to a downtrend in Peloton. So let's see what happens. Okay, while I'm just have a little pause. So again, we'll jump back onto it in a second. Don't forget to find out more, Capital.com, download our trading app, open an account, open a demo account. Although I don't like demo accounts, I think you've got to do it with real money. But you can trade really small with us if you've never traded before. DavidJonesTrading.com to find out more about me. Details on my online trading course. David.Jones@Capital.com. If you have any questions after today, @JonesTheMarkets on Twitter. Follow Capital.com on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Okay. Did Peloton. ARB Argo. Never heard of them. What do they do? ARB. Argo blockchain. The crypto asset mining services. Well, that sounds like a very stable company to me. We've got a dodgy spike there on the chart that's really messing with my chart. So I don't know what to do really. I think I haven't really got much data, to be honest. So I'd still be tempted to be a short seller, to be honest. Looking at what we have, which is only going back to April. I mean, it looks like it's pretty thinly traded. You know, you can see on the chart here that it's pretty thin, isn't it? So for me, perhaps we're thinking about selling short. It's maybe a bit too strong at the moment to sell short, but it's one I'd look at it, I'd see how thinly traded it is, and I probably wouldn't bother, to be honest, for me personally. But I think perhaps we've been in this downtrend for a couple of months now. Are we going to see it start to roll over again up here? I don't know. Trade shares, pro shares, ultra short, 20 plus year treasury. TBT, so it's one. Does it move the opposite way to T-bonds or the same way? Let me have a look. Oh, it doesn't say. Okay. So it's pro shares, ultra short, 20-year treasury. Let's have a look. Oh, messy chart. I don't know. I think the problem is, again, we've got really patchy data. We've only got 3 months worth of data. I don't know. Based on what we've got in front of us, I would be tempted, if I was a buyer, I'd put a stop under 20. But on our platform, clearly we've not been covering it for too long. Let me see if I can just bring it up somewhere else and we can get perhaps a better view. What was the code? TBT, wasn't it? So let's have a quick look. And if I haven't got it, we'll move on. Okay, here we go. So there it is. There's the TBT. Oh, God, it's been going down for years, isn't it? Got a massive downtrend for years. But actually, I think maybe it's turning around here. I mean, I could be tempted to be a buyer. Maybe I'd have my stop a bit wider than 20. But it's probably, if you look at the bigger trend, it's pretty early days, perhaps, to call for a turnaround. But it looks like we have broken the back of that downtrend. And at least we have pushed out to the highest since Feb of last year. So I think it's an interesting one to keep an eye on, and perhaps for more recovery in that one. Let's see. Rolls-Royce, we did look at those last week, didn't we, Rolls-Royce? And I said, I think I'm going to say it's not one for me, I think is what I'm going to say. Yep, because, I mean, it's been going down for years, Rolls-Royce. And then clearly this is Rolls-Royce engines, not Rolls-Royce cars, completely different companies. And it's just boring. Look at it. It's just boring. Absolutely dull. So for me, no trend, sideways. It's an absolutely bombed out share. I suppose if you're going to be a gamble and go for a recovery, it is interesting down here. But for me, it's just too sideways. So that for me, a bit like that pound against the Canadian dollar, just nothing much doing. You know, whenever it dribbles back down below a pound, we see buyers come back in. So perhaps, you know, if it dips below a pound, you might see it as an opportunity, but it's not really one for me. Copper. Let's have a look at copper. We do have a trade in copper, actually. Hold on a second. There is a trade in here. There's a trade in here, there you go, from the 26th of April in copper. So long copper in this account. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at it. I'm still bullish copper because the trend is up. You won't be surprised to hear. But, you know, we go back to March 2020. That trend is up. Recently hit 10-year plus high, copper. So had a look through the 2011 highs. So for me, any weakness looks like a buying opportunity. The only question is, and this is always the problem, we have a long-term trend in here, and even back here in February, it was a nice little buy near that longer-term trend. When it's accelerated quite a bit away from that long-term trend, what do? Do you wait for a pullback, back to maybe 4, but the risk is the pullback never happens, so you miss out on the trade? Or do you buy it now? If I was a buyer now, I would probably pick up on the old highs from here. Feb highs at 436. It has had a little bit of a turnaround over the last week. So if I was a buyer now, I'd put my stop maybe at 420, something like that. But for me, the trend is up. So even if it drops down to 4 from here, the trend is up. It's just a better place to buy. So I'd be looking for a run back up at least to 490, maybe 5 in copper. Hold on a second. Barrick Gold. I've got a feeling we don't cover them on the platform, or maybe we have started covering. Hold on a second. Oh yeah, we have. They did some sort of weird stock split thing there, or consolidation thing. So that gap isn't actually there. Hold on a sec. What does it look like? There you go. It's a bit messy, isn't it? I'm not really getting too much from that. I don't know with that one. I think I'm going to have to take a pass on that one, Barrick Gold, unfortunately. I'm a bit confused. We looked at DXY, we looked at that. Lloyd's, I'm guessing that's Lloyd's Bank. Oh, lovely trend. Look at that. We must have looked at that before because I've got a trend line on it. Oh, that's a fantastic trend in an otherwise pretty awful few years for Lloyd's Bank, but it's a great recovery off the September. Well, it's only started last year, September 2020. So for me, it's gone from it's doubled, hasn't it? It's doubled since last September. As usual though, it's a bit like copper. The problem is for me, I always want to have a stop loss because only gamblers trade without stop losses. Where would your stop go? Where would your stop go on Lloyd's? And for me, mine would be down here somewhere, which is only sort of 10p away, but it's still 20% away from where it is now. So for me, the trend is clearly up. It looks quite extreme on the RSI. I'd rather buy a dip, but it looks strong, doesn't it? It's an interesting one. Let's come back to it and see what happens. AT&T. I did actually look at AT&T on our stocks channel. If you go to our stocks channel, I did a video on that this week on AT&T, and I think because they've been in the news because they sold Warner Media, wasn't it? And look at that. It's been a pretty dire time if you held AT&T. From memory, I think the yield is about 7%, so you at least got some dividends for it. But I think that maybe for the adventurous out there, it could even be a buy down here, for maybe a little recovery play down here. So they did spike up to 34 nearly on that Time Warner Media sale, whichever one it was. So I think it's an interesting one to watch. If I had to do anything, I'd be waiting to be a buyer, I think, of AT&T, and I put a stop the other side of the Feb low. So let's see. Let's have a quick look. What's your overall sentiment in the EV sector? Well, there's a video gone up on the stocks channel today for NIO, which is the Chinese company, electric car company. I think we'll see a recovery. Whether we will see it back as high as the January highs anytime soon, and the same for Tesla. Because I think it did feel like things got a bit ahead of themselves up here. But for me, I think we will see a recovery, but perhaps not at the same sort of pace that we were getting before. Palladium. Let's have a look at Palladium. Hold on a sec. Palladium. I've got a trade in Palladium as well, and it's not moved in the direction I thought it would. It's not yet anyway, because it did break out. It broke out to its best levels. I think this was all-time highs in early May in Palladium. So for me, the trend is still up. Big support at 2,500. If I was a buyer now, my stop would be down here somewhere. I would be expecting it to move higher because the trend is up, but it's just been backing off a lot since that breakout. So let's see what happens. Vikings for life, apparently. That's Minnesota. Anna, welcome to the live stream. Soybean. Let's look at soybean. I don't think we cover it. We don't cover it yet. I think it's coming, isn't it? But let me have a look on this one. Soybean. Oh, hang on a second. Just hold on a sec. Soybean. I got Soybean Composite. I think I don't have a trade on soybean, but I think I was thinking about being a buyer actually. So because the trend is up, and it did punch out to, I'm not quite sure how far my data goes back. Not very far, but that was at least a 2-year high, probably more in soybean. Punched up to a multi-year high early May. Been backing off, and we had a bit of a day yesterday. So for me, look at that, it's bang on the trend line. So for me, I'd be a buyer of soybean. I think you know where my stop would go, but it would not be just under the most recent low. It would be probably back down here somewhere to try and give it room to chop around. But I think it's a really interesting market, this one as well, these agricultural commodities. So for me, watching to see if it can rally from here, soybeans. How old is your longest running trade? That's a really good question. I said I got a trade in Palladium. I've got a more recent trade in Palladium. But I did close one out the other week in Palladium. And I closed it out, I don't know, I think when it started backing off. But I'd had it on since August last year. So I put the trade on in here somewhere. And it made, I think it was up 20%. I think I saw a 20% return. So that was all right. But it was strange to have a trade that had been in place for so long. But that was my longest running trade. Hang on, I'll tell you now. Luckily, I am very good at keeping extensive records. So I will tell you now, my oldest trade at the moment, hang on a second, most of the trades I've got running were placed a couple of months ago. Oh, here we go, S&P. S&P in 9th of December. So I've got a trade open. So one of the 3 trades I have at the moment on the S&P, I put on the 9th of December. So wherever that is, down here somewhere. And it's been an uptrend. If the market's in an uptrend and we don't get any adverse moves, I just try and trail the stop up, trail up the stop. So I'm still in. That's my oldest trade at the moment. So there you go. Please have a quick look on Google. Let's have a look at Google. How long have we got? We've got about another 10 minutes. Google. She seems it's slowing down. Yeah, but again, going back to trends, clearly the trend from the beginning of time on Google is up. That trend is still up from March of last year. I can see what you mean when you say it's slowing down. It feels like it's stalled a bit, doesn't it, ahead of this old high up here. So for me, if I didn't have a trade at the moment, I haven't got a trade at the moment, what am I talking about? If I didn't have anything on Google at the moment, I wouldn't do anything. If it drops back to 2,000-ish, looks like a buying opportunity. If it breaks out through 2450, it's a breakout. So I think it's an interesting one to watch. It's pretty much near all-time highs. Maybe if we saw fresh all-time highs, it starts to look interesting again for me. But the trend is up, so I'll be a buyer on dips anyway. Right, what else have we got? Google, pound against dollar, we did that. You can watch the recording. So we did that. Natural gas, I came out my natural gas trade this week. That had been a good trade for me, natural gas. I think I had it running for a couple of months. I can't find it. I think it was a couple of months. And I was thinking about buying back in. I did think when we had the break that we were going to sell off for a bit and then go higher, but we didn't, so I came out. But for me, I'd be a buyer on natural gas. It is a funny market, natural gas, but if I was trading it now at 301, the closest I'd have my stop, the other side of 290. So if it starts breaking below 290, I think this trend from April is definitely over. So I think it's interesting, but it is a weird old market, but I would be thinking about being a buyer. Perhaps we'll see it clearer on the hourly chart. You see, it's just strange how it moves. Just zooms and then does nothing. And the same thing again, zoomed down yesterday, zoomed up yesterday. So for me, I should have bought it here really at 295, but I didn't. So for me, if I was a buyer, stop the other side of here. Let's see what happens. Natural gas, looked at that. Tesla, we looked at Tesla. There's a video for Tesla on the website as well. Huntsman Corporation. Let's have a look at those. Never heard of those, I don't think. Huntsman. What do they do? Chemical products to the consumer and industrial markets. I don't know, it's interesting, isn't it? It's a weird one, isn't it? I mean, it went sideways. Oh, that's an hourly chart. If I looked at a daily chart, that might help. Hang on a second. Lovely trend on Huntsman. So for me, trend is up. I'll be looking to be a buyer. So as usual, the only question is, where's my stop go? Oh, I don't know, look something like that. So for me, I would be, we've punched out during May to the best levels since September 2018. So we've had a 2.5-year high, backing off from the 2.5-year high. I would, if I was a buyer now at 28, I'd put my stop the other side of 26. But that trend is up on Huntsman, isn't it? So for me, I'd be looking to be a buyer. I just thought I'd check the short on Peloton. There we go, we're up £5 on the Peloton short, down 3 on the dollar index buy. So net profitable so far. Nat gas, we looked at Nat gas, Canadian dollar, Japanese yen. I don't think we've ever looked at this one. This will be interesting. There we go. It looks really strong, doesn't it? Let's just take that. I mean, the yen is weak at the moment. It's interesting up here, Canadian dollar, Japanese yen, because we've got these big highs from 3.5 years ago coming in at 91. Let's call it 92. So just a bit above where we are now. And that is a strong trend. Clearly, great trend going back to here. Lovely entry point. If we could get in our time machine and go back to November. So for me, I don't have a trade on. It'd be let's come back to it maybe next week and see what happens up here. Again, if you really wanted to go short, you've got an obvious reference point for your stop loss up here, haven't you? Up at these levels. But still strong, I think. Ending the week, still strong. So let's see what happens. We looked at that gas, Canadian yen, Roblox. Hang on a second. Roblox. Is that the kids? It's got a great trend. It did only float about 2 months ago. I will say it's got a great trend over the last week. So for me, what would you do if you were buying now? What was that blip for? Hold on a second. Oh, so I've had no technical problems for ages, and it just feels like I had a little slight blip there. It's a little disturbance in the force I'm feeling. So I suppose it's interesting. It's early days for Roblox, whatever they're called. But we have seen it break out 24th of May. So is it this week? So 24th of May. It only came to the market recently. So for me, if I was a buyer now of the breakout, I would probably put my stop the other side of 80 on Roblox, whatever it's called. So and it's pulling back a bit. So it's an interesting one to watch. We don't have that much data. But definitely positive on that. Would you look at AMD? Advanced Micro Devices, isn't it, I think? Is it? Yes. They're having a bit of a move, aren't they, today? I don't know what's going on today. Clearly there's some news come out. Mizuho maintains buy target on today. I don't know, can't see it. I think we must have looked at these before because that line's in there. So for me, I think whenever we looked at them last time, I said I'd be a buyer with a stop the other side of 72.25. It's still the same. It's pretty sideways since the summer of last year, but definite support ahead of 72 on AMD. We did gold at the start. Why are all crypto graphs the same? Good question, because it's clearly, it's like stock indices, isn't it? It's one asset class, really. And I know that the fans of Dogecoin or Ethereum would say it isn't. But when everybody panics, they all get hit, don't they? So that's why they all look the same. Pound against the dollar, we did that one. Fresnillo Mines. Is it a gold miner or a copper miner? copper miner, precious metals. Okay, gold and silver. Let's have a look at it. Still looks a bit weak, doesn't it? Still looks weak. It's still just drifting. So for me, I'd look at that and think there's no interest for me in that one. So for me, nothing quite yet. Maybe, for those who are fans of patterns, I'm not a fan of patterns. Maybe a head and shoulders thing going on. If I had to buy it now, I'd put a stop loss at £8 or $8, whatever it is. I think it's pounds. Yeah. So for me, I'd be quite happy to sit on my hands with that one. So we looked at Fresnillo. Dow Jones, we can have a look at the Dow Jones. We didn't do the Dow. Let's have a look at the Dow. We looked at the S&P. We didn't look at the Dow. It's going to be pretty similar, obviously. There you go. It's all going up. Trend is up. Good support. We've had good support in May ahead of 33,000. So for me, it's still a buy the dips market, to be honest. Something like the Dow at the moment. Euro dollar, we covered that. We did have a look. We had a look at the S&P as well. Dow Jones, we did gold. You missed copper. You can watch the recording. FSM, what's FSM? And I think we are almost ready to wrap things up. We don't cover FSM for some reason, unfortunately, so we're going to have to end on a bit of a low note. Oh, Amazon. I think Amazon's still boring, isn't it? I think technically, it's probably a buy rather than anything else, but it's just stuck, isn't it, Amazon? Really boring one. So can I find anything interesting to look at? What have I traded recently that might be interesting? I think we've covered most of them. So Amazon is still a little bit sideways. If I was a buyer of Amazon, I'd want my stop at 2,800, but just a little bit dull. And Twitter, we did do I think I've got a trade on Twitter. Hold on a second. Yes. So I did a trade on Twitter down here, 7th of May. I think that was on a live stream. We did it at 3:15 in the afternoon. So up 49 quid on that. Yeah, the trend is up on Twitter. It's had a little look below the trend line. If I didn't have a trade and I was a buyer now, I'd put a stop the other side of $48. So there you go. That's that. Right, we are going to wrap things up. So, as usual, to find out more about Capital, go to Capital.com. To find out more about me, davidjonestrading.com, and I do put trading updates on there during the week. Any questions? So there's details on my trading course on davidjonestrading.com. David.jones@capital.com if you have any questions. At Jones the Markets on Twitter. Follow us, Capital.com, on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. You'll watch it on YouTube now. If you're not subscribed to our channel, if you could click subscribe. We have the stocks channel as well that we launched only a couple of weeks ago. Now, I'll put a link in the chat now. There's our stocks channel. You can click on that and subscribe to that. Lots to watch next week, to be honest. Lots of going on in these FX markets and everything else. Will crypto start to recover? We'll have to wait and see. But I'm going to wrap things up there. Thanks for coming along. I do always enjoy doing these. And enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your long weekend if you're in the UK. And we'll come back next Friday, do it all again, see what those payrolls look like and everything else. Okay? Have an enjoyable rest of the day.